Alrighty, guys, welcome to a special edition of the Weekly Roundup. We have some guests tonight. My partner Jerry's with me, and Sergeant Jerry, that is. And obviously, we're going to discuss what's going on with the news, with everything that's going on in Minnesota. So let me just turn it over to Sergeant Jerry. Do your thing, please.
Hey, good evening, Michelle. Thanks for the introduction. Wish we weren't coming to you tonight, actually, to tell you the truth. It's been a real rough couple of days for law enforcement in the United States, and we're going to be talking about some of that's going on. But as always, we always review if there's been any changes to the Officer Down Memorial page. That's odmp.org. And there have been some changes. We are now up to 92 line of duty deaths in the United States this year. Since we last taped, and that was just a few days ago, Michelle, they've added the following officers. They added Officer Ching Kok Yan. He went by CK. He's with Customs and Border Protection. He died on May 16th. His name was just added of COVID. They added the name of Trooper Eugene Barron Jr. of the Connecticut State Police. He passed on May 25th. He died of 9/11 cancer, which is terrible. Police Officer Cody Holt of the Grand Forks Police Department in North Dakota died on May 27th of a gunshot wound. On May 28th, Police Officer Nate Lyday of the Ogden Police Department in Utah, he died of gunshot. And on May 29th, Deputy Constable Caleb Rule of the Fort Bend County Constable's Office in Texas, he died of gunshot wound also. And those names were added to Officer Down Memorial page. And for anybody who wants to read up on those heroes, they can go to odmp.org. So, as any of our regular listeners can probably guess, we're going to be talking tonight about Minneapolis, Minnesota. We have a guest who's with us tonight. He joins us as a distinguished retiree from the NYPD. One of two of the commands that he ran when he was in the NYPD. He ran the 79th Precinct Detective Squad, which is an extremely busy detective squad in Brooklyn. And then he was the commanding officer of Clark, which sounds like a great place. It sounds like a place where you would just be drinking Bud Lights all day. But it was really a very, very important squad. They took those cases that had not been solved. Some of them were maybe a few years old. Some of them were many decades old. And they gave them a fresh set of eyes. And in some cases, fresh science was brought to bear. New investigatory techniques were used that weren't available 10, 20, 30 years ago. They closed a lot of those cases. Those guys and gals did some amazing work.
Real police work, real old-time police work.
So we thought it would be great to have this person as a guest tonight, because we're going to be talking about the death of a human being, and we needed a little expertise. So I'd like to welcome retired Lieutenant Tom Joyce to Inside Blue 360. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Jerry, for that very gracious introduction. Appreciate it.
So I guess we've all watched the tape by now. It was difficult to watch, frankly. I'm going to be quite honest. I don't understand why the forceful control of the head and neck area was necessary to be maintained for all those minutes.
Yeah, 9 minutes, yeah.
He was rear cuffed. He was prone. I get that he was a big guy, and I'm willing to bet that we're gonna see video at some point along the way where it went sideways a little bit, because there's a picture that you see in all the newspapers of the Officer Chauvin, and his shield looks sideways in the picture. So I'm guessing that there was a struggle at some point, and even rear cuffed, a big suspect can give you a hard time. But once you got him, you bring him to the ground. That's what you do when a guy is handcuffed and he's giving you a hard time. You bring him to the ground. Once you've brought him to the ground, what's the problem now? I just
Right.
don't, I just don't, I don't get it. And
It amazes me that what's even worse is that none of the other guys stepped in. They all just stood there. And it's like, years ago, there was a case of rape in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and they believe they based a movie on it. And, basically, the two guys raped the woman in a pool hall, and the other two watched. And they were Portuguese, and what happened was they ended up, everybody, with the two guys who watched got acquitted, and people were outraged there. And then the community was, and then the family, rather, this girl had to move out of the state. The community, the state was giving her such a hard time, and she was a victim. So, it's really, it's a shame, because you can't just sit idly by. What kind of human are you?
so I don't know anything about the rules and regulations of the Minneapolis Police Department. I don't know anything about the laws of the state of Minnesota. I'm sure they're similar to New York, but they might have peculiarities. I'm sure the PD's rules are similar to NYPD, but there might be some difference. Maybe this guy Chauvin was the senior officer, and
he's
the
a
other
poor
guys had to
example,
him.
man.
Uh,
I mean, he actually, and it's, one of the things I watched, again, it's, like, honestly, like, one of the things that I watched is he actually had his hand in his pocket. I remember seeing this the other day, and he had this, like, look on his face. It's like when my niece is, like, when we're playing around, and I'll say, yeah, and I'll hold her head so she can swing like this. It was just a smug little, and it's like, dude, this isn't 1970. People have cameras. That's one thing. And the second thing is, you don't do that to somebody else. Like, at what point is it like he's on the ground and he's cuffed? Like, you know what I mean?
so Tom,
I don't get that. I just don't get it.
Let me ask you a question. You've probably investigated 100 homicides, if not 500 homicides. Who the hell knows?
Yeah, probably active while I was a sergeant with 7-7 squad, and then 7-9. It's probably over 200, active while they were going on. And then when I got to the cold case squad, I went to CIRD at the Chief of Detective's Office, Computer Investigative Resource Division, and I said, give me all the open homicides that you have in the city. And they said, well, everything that's digital and computerized, it goes back to 1972. Everything else before that is manual. I got about 8,000 homicides. So there was 8,000 homicides that we had access to. And then what we would do is we would just go to the precincts, look at the archives, read the case folders, and triage the cases. And then anything that we thought was substantial, had some kind of meat on it, if you will, we would bring back, sign the case out of the local detective squad and take it over. What we were able to do is a homicide folder, for those of you who don't know, has a lot of information on the front. It would be the name, address, date of birth, any identified numbers, state identification numbers. Then it would have the manner and cause of death, location, and you would be able to triage a case. You could tell what happened just by reading the cover. Like an outside location of a certain male demographic at 4 o'clock in the morning with gunshots. You knew what that was, versus and in this case, we might be talking about an asphyxiation, a manual strangulation case on an inside location of a female victim would tell you in a completely different story in another case. So what we would do is we would triage those homicide cases by the cover of the envelope. And then if we thought it required some additional reading, we would read them, and then we would ultimately work.
Tom, you mentioned something that I think is key, and I'd like you to explain it because you know it better than Michele or I do. Explain manner and cause of death, and what's the difference? And because we're going to be hearing about that probably out of Minnesota over the next few days.
Sure. So, in the world that we as police officers work with, the manner that you'll face most often is either homicide or suicide. And homicide, in its plain definition, and I'm not a pathologist or a medical legal examiner, but a homicide is at the hands of another human being. That does not mean it's criminal. It does not mean you get a murder charge. It does not mean you get a criminally negligent charge. It means that a person died because of an action of another human being. Suicide is the death of a person administered upon themselves.
Okay.
So those are the two main ones that we work on. And then cause of death could be gunshot wound, could be manual strangulation, could be asphyxiation by drowning. So your manner that we're mostly working with is either homicide or suicide. Was it intentional or accidental? And then what is the cause of death? What are the injuries on the body that suffered trauma that caused that person to die?
Right, because I noticed that when they did the charge of the officer arrested, they brought into, maybe you can explain it, you can obviously can explain it much better than I can, is the mental culpability.
Right.
You know, so that's really like, and again, you know, what we saw in the video, you know, is one thing, and then there's degrees as to what was going through the person's mind. So I know what, you know, I kind of know from, you know, basic police work, but you tell it the way it's really supposed to be told.
So I think the three areas that are most important for this conversation, and again, the legal statutes in Minnesota might deviate a bit from New York, but I think the audience will get the gist of the conversation. So you have an intent. I intended to harm this person so much that if they were to die, it didn't matter to me. In fact, I might have even wanted that person to die. I had intent to injure this person, and if they died, then so be it. Or straight up, I intended to kill this person. I wanted them dead. The next one would be like depraved indifference, taking an action that you have no comprehension that you're doing something that may result in this person's death, and you have no awareness of that. And then reckless. Not even thinking anyone's going to get injured, but I'm just behaving in such a manner, and I'm, you know, throwing M80s in the air, and it lands in somebody's lap and kills them. So that's reckless. And I think those are the main three that you really see a lot within the investigative process in trying to get, to your point, Michele, the state of mind of the individual. And that's really hard to get into. That's where the prosecutors have to be really, really good. The detectives have to be really good.
Right.
What is the chance that they've gotten any kind of tox screen back on the victim at this point, knowing if he was had a high alcohol content or some kind of illicit drugs in his system? Would they have any kind of indication of that at this point, or is this just too early?
Well, you know, you can, you know, someone with some authority can make a phone call and rush and expedite the process. I think they could, from a physical standpoint, I'm sure they could probably do it by now. I would even guess, and I'm speculating, I have no idea, they might even already have it and they're holding it and framing the statement that they need to check. A couple hours before this broadcast here, I checked to see if there was any news articles on a release of a postmortem examination or an autopsy, and there hadn't been. I believe that it's been done, it's been completed, all indications that it is, but they're not releasing the cause of death, and certainly the tox is waiting to come back. So yeah, we could be looking at, you know, any type of substance that might have caused it. And, you know, and I was also thinking about this too, if the audience
maybe caused a little bit of behavior.
Oh yeah,
that might have.
Well,
I mean, 9 minutes on a neck. You know, we just have to really be careful with that.
So I guess I mean, Tom, this is why we got you on. I would think, though, it's possible that if the neck triggered some kind of medical reaction, and if the doctor, if the pathologist determines the neck pressure wasn't enough to kill, but it was the combination of like the drug and neck that pushed him over. And by the way, we don't know.
We don't even
right. I mean, that's something that's just honestly turning this whole thing into like a Rodney King thing.
Listen, we don't know if this guy had any compression injury yet or not either.
I've had a neck injury. You know, when somebody's on your neck for 9 minutes and you can't breathe, you get off the neck or it becomes fractured.
You know? Listen, it'll show in the
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But when my whole thing is that the way, you know, the way that they started to give stuff away, you know, the information away, and like the governor was very honest and open and said, you know, this is this and that. And, you know, I thought, like, when they said, you know, the reason why they locked the guy up and they took 4 days, yeah, they wanted to dot their I's and cross their T's, just like any other high profile case. So, because they already know what's going to happen, when they bring this guy in, and they know what they have to face. So, and some people take it like, the opposite way, but I took it like, no, they had what they needed for right now. They didn't, they're not going to just lock somebody up immediately, just to lock somebody up. They waited 4 days.
Well, I don't think flight was a problem. I don't think they thought he was going to flight. So he probably was being watched.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It was 4 days, but I mean, I look at it like that. Like they didn't just rush and say, let's do this. And then there's always a little, and I don't know that this guy has the money that, he can hire a dream team, but
Well, his union will probably support him. Let's face facts. This was on duty. He was called to the scene to take police action. This was a result of the police action. His union should pay for his lawyer. Whether they don't want to or not, for political reasons, they should. It wasn't like he went out on duty rogue and went and sought this guy out, right? And it wasn't like it was an off-duty incident or or he killed his wife or
I understand,
his wife's lover or something like that. This was a 911 call. He got summoned to. He took police action, and the person died. I think it's the responsibility of the union actually to represent him.
Yeah, when it was for what was it for? Forgery.
Yeah.
A counterfeit 20.
That's a big one.
Yeah, and I think another
just bring it to the other 7-Eleven, boys, right? Go break this for me. I used to work in Macy's, and the thing would go, I don't give a shit. Just go break it at the bodega. I'm not seasoning it.
The other thing too, you don't want to rush into an arrest too, is because you don't want to do something wrong.
Exactly.
So, there's procedural steps that you want to follow. And to Jerry's point, there was not a flight risk. He was probably guarded and watched. He's not going to escape. But again, this is where a really strong statement and a really thoughtful statement, this is where Ferguson went sideways really fast. Because they did not have a good PR team to give out the right statement and control the information flow so that the public got what they wanted and needed to hear. And you know why? I'll tell you why. Now working in the private sector, we have public relations people who are extremely professional and they make an enormous amount of money. And the people that do it for law enforcement are the lower tier.
Well, look at the high profile cases. When you take an OJ or something like that, if that was you or me, we wouldn't have been able to go to Vegas and get our stuff stolen.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So you're absolutely right. They, it's a whole different level. And, and that's the thing. It's, I can see them. I mean, I was just a detective, but again, I told this to Jerry, the last thing you wanted to do was anything like this. That was the furthest thing because you just screwed everybody.
So I don't want to thank. Yeah. Oh, listen. Obviously,
I have to thank every cop that I work with. None of them. I worked in narcotics and I worked in precinct, but none of those guys ever got out of control like that. Never. And I mean, I remember one time a guy was going to bust, and the sergeant was, all right, enough. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, so that's why, and I'd like to think, and then Jerry, you could take it over, New Yorkers act differently. We really do.
Well, I like Tom, I've worked in the private sector and I've been all around the country seeing cops all over the country. And there's a lot of good cops out there who could really actually teach the NYPD a couple of things. There's some really, really great cops out there in the country. Just because, and from some small towns, believe it or not, that just do amazing work. What I was curious about is, so he was charged with murder in the 3rd degree, and they're kind of similar to New York State. They have 3 degrees of murder, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and they charged him with manslaughter. And again, I didn't read the Minnesota Penal Code, so I don't know if it's or
I'll tell you what, that you can always upcharge, but think what the public reaction is going to be if you charge murder and then knock it down to a manslaughter. So it's better that they walk in and gradually work their way up.
Okay, yeah, because I was curious. First of all, I don't know if they have a grand jury process out there or if they have, I know some states do the pre-trial hearing thing to certify the arrest. I don't know what Minnesota does. And the other thing I was curious about is sometimes you'll see a prosecutor will overcharge as leverage to get the defendant to plead.
Yeah.
And maybe he's charging this because he obviously, this guy's obviously going to fight this no matter what, all the way to the end. I can't, unless the autopsy shows, neck compression, broken bone is, I can't remember the names of all the bones in the neck anymore, to tell you the truth. There's petechial hemorrhaging in his eyeballs, which would have been apparent to the first homicide detective that went and examined the body in the hospital, right? I'm not quite sure where, I'm not quite sure what the reason was for murder 3 and manslaughter. Walking it up is an interesting way to go. I don't think I've ever seen that myself in my career, but like we talked earlier, you've done a lot more murder cases than me. So,
I just think it's a PR thing, because think of what the public's reaction is right now. And then if you say, okay, we're charging murder, and then they go, okay, good, we're satisfied with that. And then you have to downgrade.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying, yeah.
So I don't know this, I'm not.
No, but that's a smart way of looking at it, yeah.
They'll never tolerate you downgrading a crime. And this is the court.
Yes, I got you. Yeah. I know.
But they'll be happy saying, okay, at least we got to charge now. And then 6 months from now they upcharge you because they got more evidence. That would appease the community a lot and show.
The other thing too is I didn't realize how much civil Minnesota. I mean, who would have thought? I don't really know anything about it. I'll be honest, and that's poor on me that I don't. But that's my own problem. But it's just before the LA riots, there was the woman that walked into the court, the girl that got killed in the Korean grocery. There was a young black girl got killed. They thought she was stealing milk in the Korean grocer. The lady shot her. All right. And she got off. And so all those little things fueled, we just saw the end result of what happened with Rodney King. And there was a lot of little, it'd be interesting to see. I don't know any of that.
So there's big
race street. Is there really a big?
They got a huge Cambodian population out there, and they've got a huge Somali population out there. I don't know what was the cause. Obviously, some Cambodian person immigrated here and landed there and started bringing Cold War friends and said, "Come here, it's good." And probably same thing happened with Somali immigrants.
Okay.
But they have a big Somali population there, a big Cambodian population. I don't think that comes into play here. I don't think either one of these, Mr. Floyd or Officer Chauvin, is part of those ethnic groups.
No, I was just curious.
But it's got the same things that New York has. It's obviously small.
Well, I didn't think it was. I'll be honest with you. I didn't think that it was ethnically diverse at all.
Oh no, it is. It is.
That's why I'm so shocked, and I'm thinking this must have really. There must have been some shit going on if they're this pissed. You know what I mean? Yeah. To start burning it, and and the other thing too is what's really messed up. And earlier today they had the people talking at the rally and stuff, and honestly, they were saying they ruined a CVS, they ruined a Target, they ruined, and it's. It wasn't just big stores. It was little private businesses too. And see, that's what happens. That's why there's always these fringe kooks too, that they get out of hand. If they want to protest, let them protest. But there's always a group that's the professional agitators. And Minnesota is not ready for professional agitators. We learned about them.
Yeah.
I don't,
Hey, I want to bring someone in real quick. I'm going to bring in one of our producers, Phil McCabe. Phil is also retired from the job. He's a retired sergeant from the NYPD and worked for many years in the disorder control unit. As a matter of fact, he worked in the disorder control unit with Tom. This was a surprise to me until about a half hour ago. So good evening, Phil. Welcome to this side of the camera, Phil. First of all.
Yes.
Nice to see a fellow sergeant on this show instead of all these lieutenants.
Well, Jerry, I saw you complain about that in the last episode, and I got to tell you, the lieutenants run the job. Sorry.
Yeah, he's got a point there, Jerry.
No, sergeants run the job. Stop. Please, enough with this. But
Yeah,
but
tell
Phil,
that to Lieutenant Roberts.
yeah, you guys worked at this. Phil, you worked at disorder control for many
Yeah,
years.
from like
and you're a
95
sergeant there.
until I retired. Yeah.
When did you retire?
2011. 2011.
Okay, so 16 years you were there.
I guess so. Was it that long?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
So what do you need to do to save a neighborhood from looting?
From my point of view, which is limited to the internet and the news, basically it seemed like they didn't really conform. I shouldn't say conform. They didn't really go along with some of the basic principles of dealing with this kind of situation. They should have kind of anticipated that there would be a very large reaction. Now, any kind of death in custody stuff is definitely, tragic. And like Michele said before, this is the last thing we want when we come to work, is to get involved in kind of these situations. But still, in this particular case, it's even more so based on the circumstances. So I think they should have really anticipated what the reaction would be and prepared for it. Now, again, I'm not in Minneapolis. I don't know how they're set up. But initially it occurs to me that even though you saw them out there in their gear and stuff, they really were told to basically do it like we were told in the old days, just stand there and let them yell and scream. And what happens with this is this escalates. This allows it to grow bigger. You should be rapidly mobilizing, rapidly deploying your resources. After that, you should be containing and isolating what the problem is. Okay, you want to keep it. The way I used to characterize it back in DCU was, you want to nip it in the bud. Place the protest, by all means. You go to Manhattan, there's a protest every day. Manhattan South Task Force, or what is it, SRG1 now. They do this every day. You go to the UN. There's protests all the time at the UN, be it 2 people from some small country to thousands of people and stuff. So there's a way to do it. But rather you contain and isolate, you arrest all violators. But that is really literally any violation of the law, then you lock them up, jaywalking or whatever. Now, yeah, you can play with that a little bit. And some borough commanders actually did. They let them do a lot. They let them take the streets sometimes and stuff like that. But you want to enforce the law. And one of the other things is you have to really secure all the not special, but important locations. Should have been cops in front of Target. There should have been cops in front of CVS.
Yeah.
In the NYPD.
That would have been done. That would have been done.
Yeah, that would have been done right with the mobilization.
Because I remember, like in the Bronx, like there was always a shooting. Contrary to what everybody else, what you guys were doing, but there was always a shooting. I was in charge of the shooting board. We used to run out of room on like Tuesday, but there was always a mobilization. And it wasn't us shooting; there were shootings in the Bronx, like victims, and there was always a mobilization every single day.
Well, that's twofold too. That in some cases, there should be a mobilization, but some of these guys used to.
No, but I'm just saying, like they were doing whatever they were doing, and that's why we didn't have a precinct that got burned. It looked like there was no leadership or plan.
A perfect example is whenever we have a blackout in New York.
Yeah.
There's a cop on every corner, and everybody's told turn on their turret lights and stuff. You have that omnipresence. Same thing in this situation. You get the cops there fast, and you get them out onto the street, and you secure all these locations. And every precinct has a disorder plan, and one of the parts of that plan is they list all these locations. Everything's posted out, commercial strips, liquor. We found out from the LA riots, liquor stores, places are stored, that sort of thing. Because in the LA riots, they didn't go into the situation for hours. Stores got robbed, or the firearms got robbed in the stores and stuff. You really have to isolate it and contain it. And in containing it too, now you have a perimeter set up where people, let's face it, people from other parts of the city are going to come and try to play, all right? And you have the bad guys who are going to come and try to get their merchandise. So now when they show up, they're walking into where we have staged. They're walking into where we are all gathering to be deployed, or in addition to the ones that are already deployed. So there is a whole plan. Now, in the city, we have a tremendous ability to mobilize like 1,000 cops, like in 45 minutes. Easy. Easy. Depending upon the time of day, of course, but easy. The problems in Minneapolis could be, and again, I don't know. Number one, it's a very small department. These are going to be counting on mutual aid.
Yeah.
So if they're doing that, how much are they training with the other departments?
Yeah.
Coordinate themselves. They may be training internally, but are they training? I'm assuming they very well could be. I give them the benefit of the doubt, but it seems like that mutual aid came a little later.
Yeah.
Now you see state troopers are manning the lines.
Yeah.
The National Guard is behind. It's a hindsight observation by me, but like I said, maybe this one would be even a little bit more something to concern yourself with, and should have brought some of these mobilizations or deployments in a little bit early. At the very least, your people should have been out there.
So Phil, I was wondering about mutual aid out there as well, and if it isn't really written in stone, what's your chain of command there?
Yes,
right?
That is a problem. Yeah, that could be a problem. We even had that problem in Penn Station.
Yeah.
Where literally, believe it or not, and I don't know if they ever revised this since we held drills there, but the Amtrak sergeant would be in charge of the New York City Police Chief.
Yeah, that flaky thing, yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know if they ever hashed it out, but that's one of the things that came from practice and drills there and stuff like that. But again, how much did they do? How often do they train? I mean, we train every rookie. Well, at least I assume they're still doing it. They're training every rookie class that came out. Tommy will tell you, he was there with me training the rookies back in the day. We used to go every year. I mean,
we went every year too.
The academy kind of wrote themselves out of that plan.
But see, even with that, nobody got anything burned down.
Yeah.
Even with the winky winky,
We're good at having a lot of people. What are their resources?
Yeah, it just seemed like they don't. I don't think they have
how
that.
well do they work together? The whole goal here, as far as crowd control is to get out there, make the omnipresence, and look professional. Yeah. You see the state troopers and these guys. Form a line, form a wedge. Behind me. It's not. The plan is not to touch anyone.
Yeah, of course.
But every cop.
But during the the AIDS protest with ACT UP, when President Bush, the first one, he was staying at the Hyatt, and the chief came down, and he goes, "Don't let anybody down unless he had a room key." And so all these gay guys are sashaying down like, "Here's my room key." And then he got blood thrown on him, and the chief came back and goes, "What happened?" Like, well, they had room keys. Like, they were smart. You know what I'm saying?
People can get,
but nothing bad really happened. Like, nothing crazy happened. Somebody got knocked on the head, stuff like that. But nothing like this. And that was AIDS, and there was blood going around. And we didn't want to put our hands on anybody and stuff. And that's
nobody wants to. Nobody wants to do it. And we're more than protest all you guys. How many cops have paid for their weddings from the overtime they've got for Al and everybody else going out there and stuff? I
think we paid for Reverend Al's. We paid for Reverend Al's surgery.
Another thing I think we have to think about here, which is going to be really rough, and I hope it doesn't happen. But after Ferguson, and the way that got all whipped up, that was like a 20-day-long riot in Missouri, and there were demonstrations in other cities in the United States, as we're seeing now with this event. We're seeing demonstrations in other cities. We had a rash of police officers assassinated. We had 5 officers killed in Dallas. We had 3 officers killed in Baton Rouge, and we've had 3 officers in the city in 2 separate incidents. We had Ramos Salou killed in Brooklyn, and we had Minnesota's Familia killed in the Bronx.
Did you mention Dallas? Wasn't it?
I did. I said 5 in Dallas. So, so I'm hopeful that this doesn't lead to police officer killings across the country, but I'm fearful that it might.
Yes.
So that's the thing too. You have a lot of these fringe groups, and a lot of them too. Like, you see some of those guys, like remember the guys who are mad that their bar can't open, so they go to the state capitol with guns. Like, I don't think we would even be up. I think you would not even get up a step if you walked on the state capitol. You know what I mean?
Well, here in
Like,
New
they're
York, yes,
protesting.
definitely. The thing is, places like Virginia gets, and I saw a video today where store owners in Minneapolis,
Yeah.
minority store owners, they're standing in
Oh,
front
of
of
course. Yeah.
their guns. If you look
Yeah.
back at LA, the Korean stores were not really touched because
Yeah.
roofs with shotguns.
Oh, of course. Yeah, they were shooting back. And, you know,
And that
that's the thing,
causes
too.
more-
Like, see,
more
those
trouble.
people,
You know,
it does. And that's the thing. It's not just the target. It's not just, it's these little, you're hurting your own neighborhood. And that's the thing. Like, everybody wants to protest. Guys, just protest. And, you know, like I was taught, you have to have a thicker skin. You just yeah, okay, that's right. I'm this, I'm that. You know, oh yeah, he called me a dyke. Like, no, good guess there, buddy. You know, I'm not going to lock him up for it.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm going to
Oh,
give
what?
him, you know, I'm going to shake his hand for
Shut
being
those up.
intuitive. And
I didn't know that.
I've stood on the wood and taken a lot of abuse, and
yeah,
there's been some situations where
yeah.
I turn to one of the bosses and say, you know, maybe you ought to rotate these guys because
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. You know,
so-
and have each other look out for each other. Dude, you're going a little nuts there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You had to fight with whomever on the way in. You know, I didn't like the traffic. I would shut down the hutch in a heartbeat because no highway was available. They became real available once you did that. You know, so it's really a sad situation, and I really hope that you know there's always going to get people that locked up, but you know, again, I would hope that New Yorkers that we like to protest.
Well, let's face it, there is supposedly it was 70 college last night.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a rough situation.
I'm sure it was.
I haven't seen that a lot lately. I mean, again, you know, it's not on the news.
It's a shame because everybody's
like
everybody's
that really
lives are ruined. You know, you have the
And
the deceased cop, the deceased victim, and then you have, you know, the families. Forget about the cops. Look at your families. Look at your wife and your kids. How much fun are they going to have going to school?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I went to ground school in the 60s. My father was a cop. You didn't tell people your father was a cop. All right?
And, you know, I've heard that they're protesting at the cop's house, and it's like, that's what happens. It's a very, you know.
Think of the kids in that
Hey,
situation.
Phil, where did you live, Phil? There were like 15
Well,
cops on my block.
I'm in Nassau County. I'm out here in Nassau County. So, you know, but, you know, it was back when they started calling them pigs and the whole bit and, you know, all the protests and that sort of thing. So, you know, you basically kept
We didn't have any hippies on our block, so we were okay.
Not too long, you know, for a few
Lieutenant,
years.
how fast can they really up those results? Like they always say, like it takes how come it takes 10 days? Does it really take 10 days?
Well, on a regular case that wasn't as sensational as this, I would have loved 10 days. They were usually months. So
Really?
yeah, I think they can
said.
turn around. They can turn around lab work probably in 24, 48 hours. So I'm guessing they have the results and what those results will dictate to narrative that they want to put out.
Yeah, the DA compared it to, there was a previous Minneapolis shot a woman, and he said that was 9 months. He said because
that's right.
The severity, as Tommy puts it on this one, that they did it, you know, they did it in such a way where they wanted to do it right, but they also knew it was important to get the information out. He didn't speculate too much on the evidence, and then he said yes, they can. You know, we're still looking at it. We can increase the charges. The same thing with the other persons involved. And, you know.
You know, I'm going to say one thing about this, which I thought when I first saw it. I got to tell you, I watched the whole tape twice. And there was a point in the tape that I didn't like. Someone says to the cop, check his pulse, and the cop says, don't do drugs.
Like smug, yeah.
I was kind of like pissed off the cop when I saw that. But I have to tell you, the position he's in over the guy, I wasn't a good ball player, but I played a little baseball in high school, and I was a catcher. And he's squatting behind the plate, And you can be in like that position with your like
I
leg
can do
like
it. Yeah, you
this,
can be in
like
that
this,
long position.
right?
Yeah.
And your knee, like his knee would be like up against his neck, but not necessarily putting even an ounce of pressure on his neck. And I'll tell you something, people should be prepared that if this autopsy comes out and this guy had no neck injury, which is possible, that there'll be other riots for you two guys who were riot guys.
Yeah, but
back
the
in day.
guy was saying, I can't breathe. Just get up. Stand up.
But Michelle, remember all the, Michelle, you must have had 100 people tell you that they were injured or having a heart attack or having an asthma attack.
No, we didn't. Actually, that's
You
what.
never had guys
No, because
say-
we knew how to handle our prisoners. We had 15 prisoners on daisy chains, so we were always extra aware. We always had 3 people. If we had to go to Central, we were very, very cautious. In Bronx narcotics, this nonsense didn't happen. You know, if a prisoner got out of line, he went on a separate chain and he was processed separately. And you told the boss. I mean, and sometimes you go.
When you guys took sick prisoners to the hospital, every one of them was always legitimately sick?
They either needed, I'm not a doctor, of course. If they needed methadone, they had to get their methadone.
Many a night in Bellevue with those.
So what? You think I care if I have to take a perp to the hospital? That's overtime
what
for
I'm
me.
saying is, right,
I had to take a perp to the hospital that sued me later on.
I'm
So
just saying that the guy saying, I can't breathe. Now, it might turn out that he couldn't breathe.
he
We don't
couldn't
know
breathe.
what
He
was
died.
I
He
know he
died.
died. I know he died.
But Jerry, what you're saying is, whatever the circumstance, whatever the evidence comes out, it may be different than what people are.
Right.
Right.
And,
Right.
But
and
it's
to
not
Jerry's
looking
point,
too good for all of them.
It doesn't look that way.
It doesn't look good for any of them. For the guy who's
some people are looking at the video and their judgment is he's got all his weight on that knee.
Right.
The other leg.
And by the way, and that will show up.
That's a lot of pressure.
He will have a verifiable knee injury.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And he'll have hemorrhage in his eyes. Is it petechial hemorrhage?
petechial hemorrhaging, there are little red pin dots in the whites of your eyes. Babies who are asphyxiated do not reveal them because they're not strong enough to have such force.
Wow.
But adults, you know, young children through adults are strong enough to try and fight and have the survival instinct kick in. So that's when the blood vessels in their eyes pop. So the petechial hemorrhaging, new bruising, and then also with asphyxiation, you look at tongue bites. They bite their own tongue.
Wow.
So there's definitely exterior injuries that they should be looking at, and then the interior injuries of your neck, the larynx and the throat areas.
Oof.
And to Jerry's point, if these injuries are not serious enough to have caused his death, it's going to create another problem because it's going to look like a cover up. And who got to the pathologist to fix the autopsy report?
Do you think that they have? Do you
stuff?
think that they have the results anyway, and that's why they made those charges as is for now?
I think that
Because boss, you can go
I
ahead.
think the initial pathologist probably has a report, and it's being double and triple checked.
Because those
by
things you can pretty much
experts
they can tell right away.
Right away. Yeah.
Right? I don't know. I just know from when I watched Law and Order.
One of the things they'll do, Michelle, is they'll cut into the neck and they'll examine the bone structure and the blood vessels for injury caused by.
Yeah, like they might have seen ligatures, and they're not just going to go with that. They're going to say, "All right, I'm going to go with this," or whatever. But that stuff's got to be able to be.
Now,
done.
one of the things that will be make it difficult, Tom, is the fact that he's African American to see the bruising on his neck. Right? Sometimes, hopefully, they had their best pathologist do this guy's autopsy, because maybe a rookie pathologist might miss that if he's not used to seeing it on an African American.
See, that's the thing that's scary about these states, because they don't have any experience and they fuck things up big time.
I think they have experience there.
I don't know anything about it, so yeah.
I would say
Go ahead, Tom. Tom, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think exterior subdural levels, they could still tell bruising even if the color of the skin is too dark. So, and the other thing too about postmortem examinations are they're not an exact science, and usually they take a lot of information on the sequence of events that have happened either through eyewitness statements or the victim if they made some statements before they passed, or other circumstances of evidence collected at the scene, and then all of that information is given to the pathologist to make a logical conclusion of death. And then for your audience, there's a thing in New York called, it's an acronym called CUPPI, C-U-P-P-I, circumstances under pending police investigation, which means that the pathologist is not even going to make a determination. And what a CUPPI means to a detective is, I want more information.
Right.
More. Bring us more.
Sometimes, right. Yeah,
but in this case,
the medical examiner will ask the detectives to go out and gather further information to help.
But in this case, I mean, clearly the video is a massive help to the pathologist. You know what the circumstances were. They can then look at that video and make comparisons to the injuries, the physical injuries that they see, and the story will be a lot tighter than if that person was found there without any video footage.
Yeah,
and
there
just
is another. I
so,
saw another angle too from the street, it seems, and along the car, the other cops are.
Yeah, the three guys,
one
one guy in the middle and one guy on his feet. Right.
One guy standing at one point. One guy standing out his head, and then you have what's his name, and then three
Do
other.
we know? Do they have body cameras there?
Yeah, they have body cameras.
Okay.
But the other cops, like at the very least, you know,
Yeah.
what should they have done? Dude, enough already, enough.
Enough. Get off.
But the other thing, and I'm going to say something, you know, I honestly, and I'm going to plead my ignorance, I didn't know there was any black people in Minnesota, right? And I find out through our producer that there's this very, very large Somali
Yes.
population there. And that being said, it's like they should know how to deal with a Somali population,
I
among
think
other
Mr.
things.
Floyd is an American.
It doesn't. I know.
Yeah.
I know he doesn't. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. What I'm saying is, it's not like they just walked upon a black guy who you know, it's the first one they ever saw. They have a lot of, you know. So this is you know, you should really. It wasn't just fear out of like, oh my God, I just overreacted. I thought he had a gun or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like they don't have.
It's a
well,
diverse.
let me ask
I
you
was just
another-
I didn't realize it was as ethnically diverse. That's what
Let
I'm
me ask
saying.
you a question, though. Did anybody, any cop in this country, in the Pantaleo Eric Garner case, not hear I can't breathe story? Every cop in this country heard that I can't breathe story.
Right.
So you're going to tell me a police officer in Minneapolis is leaning on a guy on his neck and a guy saying I can't breathe and he's not.
Yeah, that was right.
That's what I'm saying. That's my
Even to the
point.
point, Jerry, where
Right.
Jerry, you said earlier, you know, oh, you don't always believe them. And there's also the story, I don't know if this is true or not. Thankfully, I've never been in that situation. But if you're talking, you can breathe.
That's what I'm
It
saying.
doesn't matter. The guy's telling you
Yeah.
he's struggling to breathe, and you already know of a previous
Right.
story that's just
That-
like
right.
Like, I just met this lieutenant, and you want to know something? The minute that some idiot had their foot or whatever on the guy and he couldn't breathe, just because I like this guy and I, you know, have a respect for human life, I would say, whoa, dude, enough. Like, that's what I'm saying about the families. What are you thinking? It goes down. It goes like the chiefs and the boys.
So I'm going to say something.
It's going to go to the sergeants and the
The
lieutenants.
cop is not thinking about the guys he works with. It always
No,
blew my mind when if guys did this.
I
They
would
think-
never do that.
You're not thinking of the other guys. Oh yeah, all of a sudden we're going to be on your side. Yeah, we're brothers in arms and everything like that.
That
but, you know,
shit's crazy.
no stupid stuff like this. No, that's no good.
It's embarrassing. You know what? I get so
Bullshit.
aggravated because it's
Why?
embarrassing.
So
Yeah,
I'm going
right.
to say that you see in the public space that they're comparing this to Garner. And I don't see this as a comparison to Garner. Garner
No, I
fought.
don't either.
Garner
I do
fought. The hands-on with Garner lasted like about a minute, maybe a little over a minute, and then it was waiting for the ambulance to come. But I will say I did see one similarity, and in both cases, there was a lack of urgency by the people there when the person down expresses that he has he's in a medical crisis. Eric Garner said he was in a medical crisis, and George Floyd said he was in a medical crisis. And there's no anybody on the radio saying rush the ambulance.
Yeah.
There's no attempt to load him in the back of a radio car. Now, Eric Garner was like 400 pounds, so he couldn't put
No,
him in
but
a radio car.
that's the other thing. Yeah.
And I think for the public who watches these tapes, obviously there was a bystander video of Eric Garner's case. There was bystander video of this George Floyd case. People look at it, it seems like nobody cares. The person is dying right before their eyes.
Yeah.
And you gotta, when someone says they're dying, maybe take them seriously.
That's what I don't understand. Like, I was never taught like that. That was the first thing you did. You got that guy to his knees and you called an ambulance right away. You know, I mean, oh my God. It just pisses me off because you give every cop a hard time because
it's going to have a ripple effect. I mean, let's face it.
And we're not all like that. These guys aren't like that.
Jerry, you said something before about this incidents going on in New York City at the different precincts.
Yeah, right now there's one Foley Square, which is probably peaceful because it's got celebrities.
I'm going to go to that one tomorrow.
There's an Antifa one going on right now by the Barclays Center at Atlantic Avenue.
That's the one where I can
take you know that cops responding to routine jobs and stuff are now encountering people that are getting in their face.
Exactly, because they say, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's the thing where, it's the broken windows theory in a way.
Yeah.
You let them get away with little things. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So now you gave all these cops, you're going to give them a hard time, and and it's like, come on, we should be better than that at this point. I mean, really.
I mean,
it's so old.
We've become pretty.
No, we haven't.
I think we've become pretty professional over the years.
Yeah.
Robin Williams used to do a routine where he was a New York cop. He said, "Let me imitate it," and he'd go, "What do you got? A knife here? Give me a knife." And he'd stab himself a few times and throw the knife back and say, "All right, leave." Believe it or not, that's pretty close.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Cops in New York have a whole different attitude towards things. And
so if I could share something that when the Ferguson thing hit, and I had done some research, in 2011, there were 98 million, this is according to the Department of Justice, there were 98 million arrests in this country. You want to know how many deaths in custody there were out of those 98 million arrests? 4,300. Of those 4,300, only 2,300 were deemed a homicide. Remember earlier we talked about manner and cause of death?
Yep.
Only 2,300. That is 0.0004 deaths in custody. The United States, with all their faults, the United States, with all the things that need to be fixed, is still the best policing country in the world, the best criminal justice system in the world. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be fixed. If there's a country that you would rather trade for their system for ours, I'd love to hear it. But the bottom line is this is devastating to the profession.
Oh, absolutely.
This is, even though the percentages are minuscule, and that I wish the celebrities would stop and the politicians would stop and just say, yes, this is a travesty. Yes, we're going to fix this. Yes, this is going to be justice. But this is not a systemic problem. And we are the most restrained police department in the country. The NYPD is, and I believe U.S. police are the most restrained in places
we don't have an African American panelist, and maybe we got to do that for our next episode. And none of us obviously can speak to the African American experience, but obviously poverty is still, after decades and decades of trying to solve the poverty problem in that community, no one has seemed to solve it. And of course that's upsetting. You can see that it's upsetting to I've worked in black neighborhoods. I've worked with black men and women on the NYPD. As the city has changed, there are now the neighborhood I live in when I was a little kid was an all-white neighborhood. Now it's completely ethnically diverse. So I've got black friends and neighbors around, and but I still don't understand. I've never occupied black skin, so I don't know what that's like. But I think when you see the anger boil over like this in some neighborhoods, it's an economic boiling over also.
Oh yeah.
And unfortunately, that falls on the shoulders of cops, and I guess that's why cops have to be right all the time, because when we're wrong, that 0.00004 that Tom talked about, it becomes the only thing that Americans are thinking about
No,
for
right.
days
It's
and
terrible.
weeks.
Yeah,
And,
it's knowing
yeah.
what the facts are. There's always more to the story in these situations and stuff. But yes, it just gets the perception gets changed, and people are
Yes.
thinking that way. And
So what I
that
think
adds to
the communities are looking for right now is for where are the police officers calling for this not to happen? And Michelle, you were talking about it earlier. It's like, we never wanted this. We don't want to do this.
Right.
And that is absolutely the case. And I think this one more, in the last 3 days, I've seen more people completely shut this down and say, this is unacceptable.
Yeah.
There's no excuse. I see nothing else. And I even was reluctant to start getting into the dialogue for 2 days, because I usually say, you know what, I'm cautious of early indications that are not accurate. I mean, the hands up with Ferguson and Eric Brown, Derek Brown was the cop.
Michael
and then,
Brown and
Michael Brown was the cop, and Derek.
And Wilson was the cop, right?
Derek Wilson.
Yes.
The information was just wrong in the first couple of days. But this one, the entire law enforcement community that's in my circle, everyone is condemning this.
Oh my
Everyone
God.
is calling for justice.
Yeah, everybody I
Everyone is
talk
saying
to the same thing.
right. And I will tell you
yeah.
that the people that I worked with, when we got in a car, if anyone got handsy or anyone started talking about silly stuff about, hey, shooting that, have you ever been in a shooting? You know what? My spider senses are up. Why does this guy always like to talk about shooting?
Yeah.
There's something wrong. And we used to get rid of those people.
Right. They would clean the precinct.
Absolutely. So, yeah. And
You're
I have
absolutely right, boss. You're right. 100%.
And I have a son that's on the job
Yeah.
now. And he's in DC right now, and he's going through it. He loves the job. He's in a moderately busy precinct. It's not the busiest, but it's not the slowest in DC. So it's a really good mix of a lot of good things happening. And he said that he's been having the greatest time. COVID turned the sun on. He goes, but he called me up and he goes, Dad, what are we gonna do? This is gonna be bad.
Yeah.
And I said, yes, you better get ready for it, brother.
Yeah, my niece is an MTA cop, and the same thing. She doesn't need a hard time, She doesn't, like your son. They don't need to be given a hard time by anybody. Just doing their job, And it's a shame, and it's like I could just never understand. Like, you're burning your own neighborhood, you're ruining your own stores.
Yeah. I mean, and so aside from how terrible that is, and it's devastating, what about George Floyd? No one's even talking about him. No one's even talking about him. And who is he? Who's his family? Where's he from? What has he done? I've heard some things. It's irrelevant at this point if he has a criminal record or not. But no one knows, because no one's talking about him, because the entire conversation has shifted to this crazy movie.
Yeah. That's what I was watching. I was on the TV earlier, and it was like it was in Minnesota, and it was all like I guess it was like part of the rally, and that's what they were trying to say. Hey, listen, we understand you're angry, but we can't keep doing this, And just like we get, I get agitated. They get the protesters. Some of them get agitated too. After a while. Who knows? Anything could set them off, and especially during this pandemic. That's what's really scary.
Well, that's right. So a lot of
that's another big deal.
A lot of
you go,
people aren't working. No schools. There's no entertainment. There's no outlets. There's no anything.
And some of those states, like I don't know if they started to open up yet, but now the weather is getting nice. You know what I mean? And now these guys are, and what's going to happen? It's just like you said, it's all pent up energy.
Yeah, so it adds to the problem. Things on their mind, they're more frustrated about things, and they need to let it out. And this is an avenue to do it, and it just adds to it. I mean, it's a real shame. Like I said, in this particular case, and you mentioned the pandemic, I wasn't even thinking of that pandemic plus this. Plus the circumstances, maybe, and again, I'm not in Minneapolis. I ain't the chief of police over there. I don't know what his resources are. I don't know, but it just seems like maybe they could have prepared better. And that's hindsight.
Yeah, because now you don't got a grocery store to go to anymore and get toilet paper and water.
And part of that, it's unfortunate, but they're usually in these type of situations is a small group that like take advantage of it.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I
And
mean.
they do this, and it's in their own neighborhood.
And you just screwed everybody from toilet paper, water, and milk.
You know, and then not for nothing. Once it starts,
Yeah, of course.
it starts. You know, you're talking about a crowd mentality,
Yep.
a herding factor, or whatever the psychologists call it. But you know, it manifests themselves, and they just the normal person in the world will start getting involved. Somebody that wouldn't even do it in the first place.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Well, listen,
You know,
hey guys, I got the high sign. So
Okay.
we're going to wrap it up. Obviously, the days and weeks are going to bring out more information about this case. It is definitely Tom Joyce, our guest Tom, was right. We should remember this George Floyd. He was being arrested for having a counterfeit $20 bill. He shouldn't have gotten the death sentence for that. But we'll find out what his cause of death was. And the one good thing about America, as Lieutenant Joyce pointed out, is we do have the best criminal justice system in the world, and all the facts will come out. And Officer Chauvin's been arrested. Hopefully, people will calm down. They'll stop writing. There'll be no more gunfire. Another person has already lost their life in Minneapolis. So hopefully things will calm down and the criminal justice system will be allowed to work as slowly the way it does, so it doesn't make any mistakes. Tom, you've been a great guest. You brought something to the table that we didn't have here, some experience with standing in the medical examiner's room in a postmortem, and it's probably one of the most important parts of this whole case. Producer Phil, for our audience, Phil is usually behind the camera sending us notes.
He's the archivist.
Reading the paper and telling us what's going on and feeding us some comments and questions for our show. But he's got a lot of experience with handling riots and disorderly situations, and it was good to have his perspective.
Thank you.
Michele, take us out, please. So you brought us in, take us out.
Listen, let's just, everybody like chill out and be cool. Stay inside, wear your mask. If you're going to go protest, wear your mask and just chill, but don't go crazy. Right, Sergeant Jerry? Is that a good message, guys? I think that's a good message.
That is a good message. Until we see you again, I guess.
Everybody stay safe. Everybody stay safe.
Thanks for the opportunity, Michele and Jerry. Thank you, Phil. Always great to see you. Thank you. Stay safe, everybody.
Always good to see you too, Tommy.